Peace, everyone. Welcome. This live is called African, isn't it? Primacy. Primacy. Okay, we have a special
Yeah.
guest, God Energy. I'm going to let him take the floor. So we have one person in here now. I'm not sure who that is, but welcome to the live. Peace and prosperity to you. Hopefully, others will join as we continue to talk. So I'm gonna let him take the reins and pretty much talk about what he didn't hit on the last time that he was here. So if you want to introduce yourself again, God Energy, go ahead and let them know who you are, and then go right for it.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for providing a space for me to speak, a platform. It's always a pleasure being a guest. Peace to everyone out there listening. I'm your brother God Energy, small time activist, researcher, teacher in the community. I've worked to push legislation in my city and the next city over. I've taught at youth programs, and I'm just here to spread this information and scholarship that we uncover. You know what I mean? So, with that, right, the show is called African Primacy. And what does that mean, right? And primacy, right, equals firstness in this context. So, we're going to be discussing African firstness amongst nations and amongst peoples, because we are subject to different ideologies of the nations that we reside in, the colonial masters that we have, and we hear narratives of other folks being God's chosen people, and we hear ideologies of other folks being supreme and the supremacist ones, right? And these are all ideologies, but when you start to compare the different sciences and the empirical data, right? When you cross-reference the archaeology, the linguistics, the osteological findings, meaning the bones, when you start cross-referencing the ethnology, the linguistics, the genetic evidence, what you find is African primacy, meaning African firstness amongst peoples and nations. And that's kind of what we're gonna get into here, because one of the most quantifiable measures of change in urban communities is this type of information, right? It is this type of information taught by various organizations throughout African American history that have changed the lives of our community, right? Producing lawyers, doctors, civil engineers, people that educate on different levels, economists like Dr. Claude Anderson, right? It is this type of information that fosters our growth and progression. And it's exactly why this type of information is kept from us. So we have to marry these two things hand in hand together. We have to come to the realization that not knowing this information is part of our stagnation, right? Keeping this information from us is part of the social engineering that stagnates us. So I just want to, broadcast this and help ourselves get a more firm grasp on history in general and our history, right? Because a lot of people aren't familiar with that history, aren't familiar with what the academics are really saying, right? So we're going to talk about a few people groups of Africa and how they spread and what then there was accomplished, right? So you have these mass groups of people. You have what we're going to focus on are two major groups, right? Two major groups starting in Northwest Africa, the entirety of Northwest Africa, spreading from Egypt in the east all the way past Libya and Mauritania in the west, right? And what you see is a mass movement of peoples from that area into the Middle East. But at the same time, you see a movement of peoples from South Africa up the Nile Valley into Kemet, up the Nile Valley into Kemet. And it's these migration patterns that we're going to talk about, right? So they say agriculture started in the upper Levant, right? The Levant is Syria, Jordan, Palestine. That area is the Levant. So hold on, I'm gonna put this on do not disturb.
It's okay. Go ahead.
No doubt, no doubt, right? So agriculture was first started by a group of people known as the Natufians, right? These Natufian peoples of the Levant, they just so happen to be, right, migrants out of Northwest Africa, related to the Unanian and Capsian cultures of Northwest Africa that encompassed all the way from Morocco all the way over to Libya and Kemet in the east. And it's this mass movement of peoples that travel into the Levant and become later known as the Natufians. And these Natufians are credited with forming agriculture, the beginnings of agriculture. So they tell you that agriculture started outside of Africa. But what they neglect to tell you is that these were African migrants still, right? Carrying the E haplogroup, one of the main haplogroups of Africa. But not only were they carrying this E haplogroup, they also brought with them the Proto-Semitic language, right? So what am I implying here? I'm implying that, yes, the home of the Proto-Semitic language started in Africa. Proto-Berber, Proto-Chadic, Proto-Canaanite, all starts in this Northwest African location, then migrates out of Africa with peoples like the Natufians of 9000 BCE, right? And it's these Natufians that first populate the Levant, right? AKA the Holy Land, but they also populate Mesopotamia, right? So we have these Africans that are the foundating populations of the Middle East, basically. But it doesn't just stop there, right? So not only do we have that first population of Africans, around 6000 BC, you see the Ubaid culture start in Mesopotamia, right? And it's this Ubaid culture that competes with and pushes out the earlier Natufians. But who are these Ubaid period Sumerians? These Sumerians happen to be Kushite migrants. What do I mean by Kushite? People of Nubia, the Nile Valley, right? So this does appear and happen before the established civilization of Kush. So let's be more accurate and call them Nubians or Ethiopians, right? So these Ubaid period Sumerians are descendants of East Africans, these Ethiopians who migrate out of the Horn of Africa up into Mesopotamia, right? But they are speaking a different language and bringing a different haplogroup. So our first settlers in the Levant and Mesopotamia are the Natufians, carrying the E haplogroup, speaking Proto-Semitic. Then around 6000 BC, you have the Ubaid period Sumerians, who are these Ethiopians. They are off of the L2 and L3 African haplogroup. And they are speaking a Tamil language, a Tamil-related language. Tamil being the indigenous language of the peoples of India, right? These people known as the Dravidians. But these people are all former Niger-Congo speakers, right? So these Ethiopian migrants, these Nubian migrants that form Ubaid period Sumeria are former Niger-Congo speakers, right? And we'll get into the sources on all of this, right? But I'm just laying down this foundation for you all, right? So let's talk about how we're gonna substantiate this, right? We know of the Sumerian mythology, right? The Anunnaki, the Igigi, love to talk about them. But the only reason we know of this mythology of these Ubaid period Sumerians, right, these former Niger Congo speakers, is because that cuneiform was deciphered. Well, what is the story of that decipherment of cuneiform? Right, cuneiform was deciphered by Sir Arthur Keith, British Orientalist of the British East India Company. Right, he was a politician, historian, and linguist. And this is documented in the works of A.H. Safes, right? So why do they not tell us about this linguistic connection, right? The necessity of African linguistics to decipher cuneiform. So this, along with the ethnological findings, along with the archaeological findings, is what convinced Sir Arthur Keith that Kushites and Puntites, right, people of Somalia, had founded Mesopotamian culture. So this is extremely important. Not only Sumer, but Akkad. And these things are extremely important to realize how much has been covered up and how much we misinterpret the ethnologies of ancient civilizations, right? So much so that we aren't even taught the names that these people called themselves, right? Sumer, the Sumerians, they did not call themselves Sumerians. They did not call themselves their land Sumer, right? These people speaking this former Niger Congo language, these people called themselves Sagigas, right? Sagiga, meaning black-headed ones. That is the inside name or endonym that they called themselves. But as also revealed by A.H. Sayce, the Assyriologist and linguist, the Assyrians called themselves Salmat Kakadi, meaning black-headed ones, right? So we see a continuation of this endonym, this self-descriptive endonym, being used by first the Sumerians, then their replacement peoples, the Assyrians, because we have to know that the Assyrians, Babylonians, Sumerians are not all the same peoples, though they shared the land of Mesopotamia, right? So these things are important to ground yourself with, so you're not thrown off by misnomers or exonyms, outside names, names that outside people imposed on these figures, right? So let's talk about this Dravidian expansion a little bit more, because it's so concrete, right, that even the Bible speaks of this, right? And we know that the Bible, no, is not a word-for-word narrative of history. But when you do the critical analysis of the text, you do see how the Bible contains and remembers historical concepts, which are very well preserved therein. But you just have to know the details to see where the generalizations are happening, right? So when the Bible speaks of Nimrod, the son of Cush, right, I believe in Genesis chapter 10, Nimrod, this son of Cush, is attributed to establishing Calneh, Nineveh, Rehoboth, Akkad, Babel, all of Sumeria, right? So we even have correlating evidence from a spiritual text about this expansion from East Africa into Mesopotamia, right? So you can drop that as a precept, so to speak. When they say, what's the precept? Well, there is an actual precept supporting this East African or Kushite expansion into Sumeria, right? And then the relevance being that Terah, Abraham's father, right, serving on the council of Nimrod, this Kushite, and Abraham, the forefather of the Hebrews, coming from this Kushite settlement, this Kushite colony, right? So these things are very important. But I want to move on to how that Sumerian language not only came from the Niger-Congo languages, but what it turned into, right? Because as these people are spreading from East Africa into Southern Arabia, into Mesopotamia, into India, into Iran, and into China, right? Their language is developing a little bit. It's changing a little bit as time goes on, as distance is put between them and their African homeland, right? So this Niger-Congo language becomes what we know as Tamil, right? And Tamil is the language spoken by the melanated indigenous populations of India, right? Those that are called the untouchables or the Dalit, right? If you're familiar with the Hindu caste system at all, right? Those dark-skinned peoples at the bottom, those are these Tamil speakers. They also are Telugu speakers and Kannada, right? The Dravidian people are very diverse in that way. But they are all from this East African migration characterized by the L2 and L3 haplogroup, which becomes the M haplogroup once they reach India. So what do the modern day descendants of these Dravidians find out, right? We have scholars such as K.P. Avanan, right? He was the vice chancellor of the Manomanyan Sundanar University, right? Vice chancellor of the Tamil University of Thunjavur, right? And it is K.P. Avanan that illustrates that Dravidians and Africans share many physical similarities, right? Including their skull size and shape, which are called dolichocephalic indexes, right? When you hear of the term dolichocephalic or brachycephalic, we are talking about skull shape, right? And what the significance with that is that the Africoid skull shape is longer from front to back than it is from ear to ear. And it's these types of things that help you pin down the ethnicity or ethnology of these ancient civilizations, right? But it's not just the skull indexes. They note the flat, broad noses that they both share, but also stature and blood type, right? So we're touching back on the genetic evidence, right? And Dravidians and Niger-Congo speakers, like I stated, both have a descent from C group Nubians. So you can see how a population in East Africa, these C group Nubians, some of them stayed in Nubia, forming the Kushite Empire, right, at their center in Kerma, Napata, Meroe. But some of these C group Nubians spread west to become Niger-Congo speakers. And some of these Nubians spread east to become Sumerians and the Dravidians of India, right? And the Dravidians settled in India between 3000 and 2800 BCE, right? And these Dravidians, they spread into Central Asia, China, Southeast Asia, like I said, right? And it was probably from Iran that their bronze working had spread into Western Asia, right? And what the geneticists have found out is that the earliest civilization in India, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, was established by these Dravidians, right? The term they like to use are ancestral South Indians. So when you look into the history of India, you have these terms called ancestral South Indians and ancestral North Indians. And it has become clear, right, that Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were started by these ancestral South Indians, characterized by this Dravidian expansion. But there are also cultural similarities that we see with Africans and their Dravidian descendants who moved to the east, right? In their religion, they venerated the cow. The cow is one of the most sacred animals in India, right? It just so happens that the cow is also one of the most sacred animals in East Africa and Africa in general, right? So much so that in Nubia, in this Kushite civilization, the economic system was based off of cattle. So we have so much cultural continuities religiously there. The serpent, right? We all know of the snake charmers of the East. And we all know how the serpent was one of the most revered animals in East Africa, in the Nile Valley. The Egyptian pharaohs, right, wore a Uraeus serpent on their head to symbolize their enlightenment, right? They had winged serpents known as seraphs that were emblems of protection, right? They had many deities that were depicted as the serpent. So we can see the cultural continuity there, right? They had the same name for specific gods, Amma and Amman, right? They also shared the same burial techniques with circular rock-cut dolmen sepulchres. And they even shared a lost art of bronze making out of wax, right? And this has been brought out by B.B. Lal, Braj Basi Lal, the Indian archaeologist, right? Who was Director General of Archaeological Survey of India. So this man is at the height of his field, right? He is at the height of these positions in the archaeological sphere for his country, right? So what did he conclude? That Dravidians were the descendants of C group Nubians, just as his Dravidian brethren, K.P. Arvanan, right, of the Tamil University. So these are the very people that we are speaking of. These Dravidian peoples, the melanated peoples of India, when they educate themselves, when they overcome the racial caste system trying to hold them back, and they educate themselves, and they become the director generals of archaeology, what do they find about the history of their own people? They are all concluding that their Indian Dravidian ancestry lies with these C group Nubians, right? Both groups use the black and red ware pottery. These pottery shards have been traced along the exact L2 and L3 and M haplogroup migration out of East Africa through Southern Arabia into Mesopotamia and into India, right? So Braj Basi Lal, the Director General of Archaeological Survey, has traced through the black and red ware pottery shards the migration pattern of his Dravidian peoples, and it completely correlates with the genetic evidence revealed by our modern geneticists. So those pottery shards align perfectly with the haplogroup migration. So let's diversify our sources a little bit. We spoke about the Bible, right? Citing this migration of East Africans into Sumeria and India. Well, Sumeria, the Bible specifically states, right? Then I spoke about Sir Henry Creswick Rawlinson, the man who deciphered cuneiform and his use of East African languages to decipher this cuneiform. Then I just referenced two modern scholars who are Dravidians themselves, who are of this ethnic lineage themselves, and them correlating this to East African expansion. We also have the classical historian Herodotus, right, who states Osiris, right, being come to the borders of Ethiopia, raised either sides of the river, lest in time of its inundation it would overflow the country more than was convenient, and make it marshy and boggy. So he built floodgates. But after this, thence passed through Arabia, bordering there as far as the Red Sea, and far as to India, the utmost coasts that were called Nisa, right? So even Herodotus is talking about this Nile Valley expansion into India. And he says he built likewise many cities in India, one of which called Niza, willing to have remembrance of that in Egypt, where he was brought up. Also stating that he planted ivy, which grows and remains here only of all other places in India. Right? So Herodotus is even throwing in botanical evidence, right, of how this plant ivy was brought from East Africa into India. So this is important when you cross-reference different sources. And this is how you establish a fact. It's hard to use two sources from a similar origin, similar time, and similar background to establish a fact. But when you diversify these sources, right, you have the modern Dravidian archaeologists, you have Herodotus as a classical historian, you have the Bible, all having the same correlating evidence, all telling the same story, and the modern geneticists, right? An entire different field of science, all telling this same story. This is how you firmly establish these facts. And it's this methodology, right, that needs to be introduced to our people, right? Because this is the sound scholarship and sound rooting of an education process that will help us overcome our racial caste system here, right? Just like the Dravidian scholars K.P. Avanan and Brajbasi Lal have done. And hopefully we can unite ourselves as a family here, right? Not just in America, not just throwing off the shackles that we have that constrict us to neo-colonialism, right? And foster the mentalities within us that help that process and aid that process by us being divided as a people, right? Looking at each other as enemies and not seeing our common bond. Hopefully this type of scholarship can help us see the common bond that we have with our African descended brothers across the world as well, that we didn't even know existed, right? Because these Dalit brothers in India, our brothers and sisters in India, these Dalit, these Dravidian descendants, they do see us as an inspiration. What am I referencing? The fact that when we stood up during the Civil Rights era and we formed the Black Panthers to throw off the shackles of the racial caste system here, our brothers and sisters in India that were suffering from the Hindu racist caste system there were inspired by us. And they modeled themselves the Dalit Panthers in remembrance of us, the Black Panthers here in the Americas. So they were completely inspired by us and took on a similar endonym as us, calling themselves Panthers. We didn't even know they existed, right? So I feel like these things are definitely important. The same reasons why Henry Kissinger would proclaim that they have to keep the African and African American separate. The same reason why Zbigniew Brzezinski in the Brzezinski report stated that we have to keep the African and African American separate. That's the same reason why the powers that be have an investment in keeping us as African Americans separate from our African descended brothers in India as well, because there is strength in numbers and the tactic is divide and conquer, right? So to close out this topic on the Dravidians specifically, this East African expansion into Sumer, into India, right? I want to reference the linguist Carl H. Mengiz, right? In his reviewed work, Turkic Languages and Peoples, right? An Introduction to Turkic Studies. Look how far-reaching this is, right? We started with India and the Dravidians and Sumer and Mesopotamia and East Africa, and now we are brought all the way into Turkey, right? That's how widespread this Black hand is. But let's see what Carl H. Mengi says, right? In an introduction to Turkic studies, he found using linguistic data, right, that an early habitat of the Dravidians being on the plateau of Iran, right? And this is confirmed by archaeological evidence of an Indus culture in Inner Asia, right? So the epicenter for that Dravidian dispersal was Iran, right? So we're not even talking about how this melanated culture made its home in Iran, then also into India, as well as Sumeria, right? And it's scholars like Dr. Loganatha, who is a Sumero-Tamil scholar, who helps concretize for us this connection between the Sumerian language and Tamil, right? Quoting from Dr. Loganatha that anyone speaking Tamil sees Sumerian as immediately recognizable, right? So if you speak Tamil, you are automatically familiar with the Sumerian language because the two are related, just as our linguist Carl H. Mengiz here is pointing out as well, right? So it says this would explain the close relationship between Dravidian, Elamite on one hand, and Dravidian, Sumerian, and Manding on the other hand, right? So Sumerian was once considered a language isolate. But what has been brought out by scholars, linguists like Carl H. Mengiz, is that Sumerian does fit into a language family. It just so happens to be African. And that's why the connection has been skipped over for so long. So just like Carl H. Mengiz says, right, you have a language family that includes Dravidian, Sumerian, and Manding. This is extremely important, right? So I want to also move on now, right, and talk about a different area. We're going to switch gears a little bit.
Okay, that's fine. I did put in the chat the link, God Energy, so if people want to come up, are you okay with that?
I'm definitely okay with that.
So anybody that wants to come up, just click the link and it'll bring you up here and I'll add you to the stream. Go ahead.
And actually, before I switch gears, right, because I got a little rambunctious, right? I actually want to continue on this topic of the black expansion into Asia, right? Because it's not just these Dravidians that populated the East. It's not just these Dravidians that populated India, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia and China, right? You do have these peoples of the Andaman Islands as well, right? Peoples associated with the Melanesians, those that populate Oceania. So these peoples also make up the population that founded, these early civilizations and make up the population of ancestral South Indians. There we go, right? These Melanesians are also part of that ancestral South Indian family. And not just them, a population we know as the Negritos, right? Or the Pygmies, which happens to be where my maternal haplogroup stems from, right? So this is knowledge of self that I'm talking about. Most definitely, right? Shout out to my mama, right? Because it's through her lineage that I am connected to these Pygmies or Negritos or Twa, as they would have been known in Kemet, right? Characterized by the Egyptian god Bes. And it is these peoples that the San Bushmen are related to, the Khoisan, right? Which genetics has found to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, right, population groups of peoples traceable on the planet. So you have three groups of peoples, African populations migrating to the east, migrating into Asia. These famous Dravidians that I've been speaking about, right, going on and on and on about. You have Melanesians, right? Characterized by people of the Andaman Islands and Solomon Islands. And we also have Negritos, as they're known in some scholarly works, or Pygmies, right? Or Twa, if we want to use our African scholarship. And it's these amalgamation of peoples that also form the first populations in Southeast Asia and China as well, right? And these first civilizations in China are known as the Xia civilization and the Shang civilization. And in the Chinese histories known as the Turtle Scrolls, what do we find there? What endonym do we find? We find mention of the Li Min, black-headed ones. So you still see a maintaining, a continuity of the endonym black-headed ones, right? And these same black-headed ones, characterized by the Dravidians of Sumer, right? Characterized by these Assyrians who called themselves Salmat Kakadi, the Sumerians who called themselves Sagiga, all meaning black-headed ones. These Dravidians migrated into China. And the evidence is suggesting that once they got to China, they kept the same endonym black-headed ones that you see as Li Min in the Turtle Scrolls. So this is a continuity of the inside name, the name that we would call themselves, that they would call themselves. Sorry. And I feel like this is very important because when we identify who the ancestral black population is, it's easy to see and point out who replaced that black population, right? And the Xia and Shang, the Xia civilization was centered around Erlato, right, along the Long Shan and Yellow River valleys in China, right? And in the Chinese histories, it is explicitly stated that Chinese culture came from the West, right? The West. What is West? Africa is West. Sumer is West. Iran is West. All places that are Dravidian settlements and hotspots that we just cited, right? So the Chinese history itself still maintains this ancestral black-headed lineage with the term Li Min in their Turtle Scrolls. That endonym. It still maintains this remembrance that they migrated from the West, from these darker populated lands. So I feel like these things are so important to help do away with our sense of inferiority. We hear of so much history. We're told of the greatness of so many different places, and we feel like the history just zigzags right past us. When in reality, these histories are our histories, right? So let's cross-reference some of this information, right? In September 1998, in a scientific study posted in the Los Angeles Times, it concluded that most of the population of Niger, of modern China, right, 1/5 of all people living on the planet, owes its genetic origins to Africa, right? This is important. This is important. 1/5 of the population of the planet, right, that we don't see as African, owes its genetic origins to African peoples, right? What is another piece of citation we can have? From the realm of physical anthropology of early China, right? According to the preeminent scholar in the field, Quan Chi Chang, skeletal remains, that's the osteological analysis, right? Skeletal remains from the Hoa Binhian and Baksoimin, right? Baksoinan strata, sorry if I'm murdering that, right? Is similar to those found in southwest China. They bear oceanic Negroid features. Those are those Melanesians that I was talking about. Those peoples of the Solomon Islands, the Andaman Islands, right? Australoids. They call them Australasians. But these are those Negroids of Oceania, right? They're known as diminutive Africoids. And they populate the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Right? So we have the modern Chinese scholars, preeminent scholar in his field, Quan Chi Chang, doing the skeletal analysis, the osteological analysis, similar to Braj Basi Lal of India, right? What are you finding? Not when we keep our head in the clouds, not when we're fantasizing about Anunnaki gods up there. What do you find down there in the ground? They have you so busy looking up about mythological and Anunnakis and Pleiadians. You're skipping right over what's found down there in the ground. The tangible evidence. You are there. This is your legacy. This was started by you, melanated man and woman, while you're busy theorizing about fantasy beings from the sky. Well, this is important. But moving on from China a little bit, let's talk about Southeast Asia, right? Let's talk about those that are in Malaysia and Thailand and the Philippines, right? So in 1923, right, in his Racial History of Man, which is a hallmark work in ethnology and anthropology, right, we have to introduce ourselves to these other fields of study, not just history, right? Not just his story. It is these other fields of study that will do away with his story and just tell the story, right? Tell the true story, tell our story, right? So, in his Racial History of Man, a hallmark work in ethnology and anthropology, right, of Harvard University, and the librarian of the Peabody Museum, Roland B. Dixon, noted that the ancient Khmer was the first civilization in Southeast Asia, right? Centered around Cambodia and Thailand, right? Those that built Angkor Wat. What does he say? The Khmer were marked by distinct short stature, dark skin, curly or even frizzly hair, right? That's an afro, broad noses, and this is the term he uses specifically, thick negroid lips, right? So based off of the findings, based off of the archaeological evidence, the anthropological evidence, right? This ethnology, Roland Dixon, gives us a full description of these first Southeast Asians of the Khmer Empire, right? Those that built Angkor Wat, the largest religious structure on the planet, were fully described as being black peoples, right? Dark-skinned people, short in stature, with broad noses, frizzly hair, and thick negroid lips, right? Matching completely what we stated about these diminutive Africoids that populated the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Sumatra, Indonesia, right? The Chinese histories called them black dwarfs in the Three Kingdoms period. So this history is definitely important. It's so important to our self-esteem, to our view of world history, racial history, and world politics, right? And these people of Khmer, of Southeast Asia, were heavily influenced by their Dravidian cousins, by their Dravidian brethren, right? They were practicing the Buddhist culture, and the people of Khmer even used Sanskrit, right? One of the Indian scripts known as Sanskrit as their script for their royal courts. So this history is deep, and it's not just one population group of Africans that migrated into the East, right? We spoke about the Dravidians of the M haplogroup, off of the L2 and L3 haplogroup. We talked about the Negritos, the Twa, the Bushmen, characterized by the L1 African haplogroup. Then we also spoke about the Australoids, right? The people of Oceania, right? Related to the people of the Andaman Islands and Malaysia and the people in Australia. They're characterized by the C haplogroup. And it's these three populations of Africans that populated, migrated into India, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and formed these ancient civilizations. So that's that expansion east, right? But let's talk about the Western world a little more, right? The very first Greeks and Romans were black people, right? The first Greeks and Romans were black people. The first people to inhabit Greece, the first people to inhabit Italy and the lands of Rome that would become known as Rome. These were black people. The Minoan civilization, the first civilization of Greece, started by black people. The Etruscan civilization, right? The first civilization of Italy were black people. And it is these Etruscans who ruled over the province known as Rome. The first kings of Rome were these black Etruscans, right? So these black Minoans of Greece, let's start with the black Minoans of Greece, right? These were the people that gave you the mythology of the labyrinth, the great labyrinth of Crete, right? And the Minotaur, the bull-headed figure that guarded that labyrinth, right? These were black people, descendants from the Aurignacian culture of 30,000 BCE, right? They don't tell you that these first peoples that went into Europe and replaced the Neanderthal were black people. It was Homo sapiens sapien, the African, that migrated into Europe and replaced the Neanderthal, right? This early prehistoric Stone Age black culture, they were called the Aurignacians, 30,000 BCE, right? These were the peoples that are responsible for carving what are known as the Venuses, right? The little fertility statues that depict buxom naked women, sometimes pregnant and sometimes them holding their pregnant stomach. It is these peoples that created those Venuses. And it's these peoples who are the ancestors of these black Minoans of Greece. Right? These early black Greeks, they spoke a non-Indo-European language. Non-Indo-European language. They used Minoan hieroglyphics, right? Hieroglyphics being descriptive choice for the black family at that time, right? These Minoans are responsible for what is known as Linear A, right? The non-Indo-European. Then you see the migration of the Indo-European into Greece to replace them, known as the Hellenes, the Hellenistic culture, the Mycenaeans, the mainland Greeks. And it's these Greeks who learn from the Linear A and hieroglyphics of those black forefathers of Greece. And they then create Linear B, which most are familiar with, and then which turns into the Koine Greek and such and other things like that, right? But the archaeologist and professor emeritus of Egyptology, right, at the University of Vienna, Manfred Biatek, conducted extensive research on the ancient Greek civilization, right, and its connection to ancient Egypt. Because these early inhabitants, the migration didn't stop with the Aurignacian peoples. right? The movement into the Levant by the Natufians in 9000 BC wasn't the only movement of North Africans. They also went north across the Mediterranean into Greece. And the work done by Manfred Bietek, the professor emeritus of the University of Vienna, right? He unearthed the evidence of artwork as early as 7000 BC that depicted the early peoples inhabiting Greece as African. And it is these African Greeks that brought the Minoan hieroglyphics to the Greek islands of Crete. It is these African Greeks of 7000 BC that later formed what was known as Linear A. And you can see in the wall reliefs in Kemet, right? The Greeks bringing tribute to the Egyptians, and these Greeks being depicted with the same level of melanated content as the Egyptians, right? When you study the coinage known as numismatic evidence, you clearly see from the coins that they find at the island of Lesbos, right, that these early Greeks had Africoid features, right? These are the coins found on the island of Lesbos.
I see him. Hey Jamal, welcome. He's on mute.
Africoid features.
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm trying to get some stuff straight up in here.
Okay. Thank you for joining the feed.
Yeah.
Peace, brother Jamal.
No doubt.
Right. Let me see if I can get my lighting back going. All right. We'll skip out on the lighting, right? So these things are important. And it's not just Greece, like I said, right? Italy was first ruled by these black Etruscans, right? These Etruscans, that is an exonym. What did the Etruscans call themselves? They called themselves the Razna, right? And the term Etruscan is where you get Tuscany from. If you've heard of Tuscany, Italy, that term Tuscany comes from Etruscan. But the Etruscans called themselves the Razna, right? And with the work done by Clyde Ahmad Winters, it shows that these Etruscans also have relation to those Dravidians that I spoke about earlier, right? And you can see in the haplogroups, you can see the E haplogroup forming around in early Europe, surrounding the territories that the Etruscans had, showing that these Etruscans were not a part of that E haplogroup expansion out of North Africa into Europe. These Etruscans were part of that L3M haplogroup, right? Completely correlating with the work that Clyde Ahmad Winters has done, linking the Dravidians to these Etruscans by way of Turkey, right? So it shows that these Dravidians migrated, as they migrated out of Nubia, out of East Africa, into Southern Arabia, into Mesopotamia, they also passed through Turkey and went into Italy. And you can see the E haplogroup surrounding the Etruscan territory because these Etruscans were of the M Dravidian haplogroup, right? And it's these Etruscans that introduced high civilization into Italy. It's these Etruscans that introduced high civilization to the Indo-European Latins, who would later be known as Romans. But like I stated before, these Etruscans were the first kings of Rome. So it is this Etruscan political system that elevates the Roman suburb and backwater, right? Terms like people and belt come from the Etruscans, right? The word we use to describe humanity, people, peoples, that's an Etruscan word. Belt, that you wear every day. That's an Etruscan word, right? So it is these black Etruscans and black Minoans that are replaced by the Indo-European Hellenes of Greece and the Indo-European Latins in Rome. But these civilizations, these lands started off as black, right? And you can even see them aligning along ethnic lines, along racial lines, because when Carthage, the Black North African kingdom, went to war with the Latins, the Indo-European Latins, right, in the time of Rome, you see the black Carthaginians aligning with the black Etruscans, just as the Indo-European Romans aligned with the Indo-European Greeks. So you see this competition in the Mediterranean between the new incoming Indo-Europeans and the black Etruscans and black Carthaginians that they were working so hard to replace. So that's another reason why getting this ethnic history is important, because you then see how much of a racial conflict has defined history, right? And it helps put into context our racial conflict, our racial struggle, and the history connected to racial conflicts. And that it is a struggle. It is something to be fought. It is something to compete in. We are not just victims of a superior people. This is a power struggle that has been going on back and forth for millenniums. And sometimes the melanated people are the victors and they hold hegemony. And sometimes the non-melanated people are the victors and they hold hegemony. So right now, the non-melanated people are the victors and they hold hegemony. But that is not a natural law. That is not the law of the universe. That is not a product of their innate supremacy. Right? This is just the third quarter in the game that we're competing in. Right? And right now, we want to take our jerseys off and become cheerleaders for their team. Right? We don't want to put on a full court press. We don't want to call an audible. We want to take our jerseys off and just become cheerleaders for their team. And that's kind of the value I see in history, right? As a playbook. Right? What is a playbook? A playbook is a reference of past situations and configurations that worked for you to overcome those obstacles in the past. And that's exactly what history is. It's a reference of past situations, showing you things that worked to overcome those obstacles in the past. And that's what I feel the real beauty is of history, right? So it's not just in these Mediterranean lands of Europe that this black legacy is, right? Because our peoples were seafaring peoples, right? There was an entire aqualithic age of Africa, right? It's called the African humid period, where the Sahara was very wet. There were rivers crisscrossing the east to the west, connecting the Nile Valley, right, to western parts of Africa. The largest lake that ever existed in history, Lake Metechad, was in existence at this time, right? And one of the most recent discoveries in archaeology or anthropology is that they recently discovered that Africans or humans, right, when they say humans and talking about a certain period of time, they only can be talking about Africans. So what they found is that Africans were cooking fish at an earlier time than they previously thought, right? And in that article, it also suggested that following the migrations of fish, Us following the migrations of fish, our main food source, is what aided our migrations out of Africa into these other places. Right? What am I getting at here? Is that we see, just like I said, the North Africans brought the E haplogroup into the Levant, we see North Africans bringing that E haplogroup up into Northern Europe, up into Britain, the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, England, right? So when the archaeologists, when they do the osteological analysis, right, meaning when they dig up the bones, they find that the first people to inhabit Britain are African people, right? They don't tell you about their black history. They don't tell you about the African origins of Britain, right? And now we're going to be getting into the work of David McRitchie, right? In his work, Ancient and Modern Britons, right? So in the Gaelic languages, in the Gaelic language, we have terms that allude to this black ancestry, to the black presence in the Gaelic culture, right? Words like Doug, last names like Douglas, Dougal, right? Stewart, Schwartz, coming from the word swarth, swarthy, meaning dark skin, right? It's also in the work done by David McRitchie that these people of Scotland, known as the Highlanders or the Picti, right? The Picti, the tribe that Mel Gibson was from in the movie Braveheart, right? The movie Braveheart, they can take our lives, but they can't take our freedom, right? That character that Mel Gibson was playing was of the Picti tribe. Well, according to David McRitchie in Ancient and Modern Britons, those Picti are synonymous with Moors, right? Moors people, another term used to describe black folks in Europe, aside from swarthy. So these things get swept under the rug, and it's hidden from us. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the negative self-image that we have, right? The sense of inferiority that we have as a people, it astonishes me. It astonishes me because the legacy and greatness that we have is so immense, right? And if it was there, we would live in the shadow of that colossus, right? And that's why I'm trying to bring that out, because we've been sweltering under the heat of white supremacy, right? So that's why I'm mounting up all of this evidence of African primacy, so we can take comfort in the shadow of that colossal work. And it's been put out there, right? I'm referencing David McRitchie in Ancient and Modern Britons, but you can find this in Nature Knows No Color Line, Anacalypsis, When the World Was Black, Black Athena by Martin Bernal. This work is out there. It's just not spoon-fed to us the same way that white supremacy is. It's just not spoon-fed to us the same way that black inferiority is, right? And when we go back to Rome, it's not even the Etruscans, right, that have this hand in the Roman legacy, that have a black hand in the Roman legacy. Roman emperors like Caracalla are of known African descent, right? Hadrian, who built Hadrian's Wall, right? The Roman who established the foundations that would become London was of African descent. They zigzag right past this for the means to induce your sense of inferiority. But I want you to ask why. on a social level, on an anthropological level, why do they need you to feel so inferior? How does that translate for political gain? How does that translate to political gain for them? How does that translate to social control for them? I need you to ask yourself why they need you to feel so inferior.
Good question.
It is a great question. We don't pay attention to these things. We need to become more civic minded, right? That is analyzing these things to see how they benefit these people civically on a civic level. And largely the conversation of spirituality and mysticism and history is used to keep us away from the conversation of civics. And that's why I want to point out the Black Panthers. I want to applaud the Black Panthers. I want to give flowers to the Black Panthers for being a political party, right, addressing Black civics. And I will wholeheartedly state that that is why they were the most successful Black movement in the Americas, most successful Black movement for us, because they were civic oriented, not religious oriented. These things are super important, and we are taking the gradual baby steps that we need to reconstruct our greatness, right? To bring our minds back to us.
Right.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I know Jamal was up here. I don't know where we're gonna do. Yeah, he's having the issues. It says devices not connected. Something with his mic and camera, which he doesn't have to cam up, but maybe it's his mic. But he wanted to know if we were gonna do like a Q&A at the end, or
Sure. I'll definitely do a Q&A at the end.
Okay, so everybody's in here. It looks like we've got Montana in here. We've got Queen in here. We've got The Truth in here. We've got Reparations, Crabs in a Bucket, Jamal. So pretty much most of the people are in here. There may be some other people. I don't know, because with YouTube, you can't really tell here. But everybody is in here, and they have been commenting. I've been putting the comments up on the screen. I don't know if you can see them when I put them up here or not.
They're a little far away. The font is a little small, but
yeah, anybody can
I'll check it all out.
Yeah, I can put the link in here. Okay, Jamal's back. Okay, there we go. Anybody can click the link and come up here. It's just like Bigo, you guys. The same way you jump in boxes on Bigo, you can jump in boxes up here, except that I get to see it first.
I wanted to close off my section about Britain. Then I wanted to tap into the Americas, and then we could do Q&A.
Okay.
No doubt. So with that, right? So they see this E haplogroup expansion into Britain, right? And that E haplogroup, like I said, this is what's carrying the Semitic language, the Proto-Semitic language out of Africa. So we have people speaking the Proto-Semitic languages migrating into Britain, into Ireland, into Scotland, into England, right? How are we going to substantiate this? You have something called the Insular Celtic languages. The Insular Celtic languages represent the oldest example of the Celtic languages. They call them insular because they are isolated to the western portions of the Irish island, to the western portion of where Wales is. So they're isolated, in a sense, in isolated populations in comparison to the other Gaelic or Celtic languages around them, right? So what do you find when you analyze these insular Celtic languages? The insular Celtic languages differ from their surrounding outside Celtic language brothers, right? They differ linguistically slightly, but where they differ from their other Celtic language brethren, they are the same as Semitic languages. So you see, in the insular Celtic languages, the oldest Celtic examples spoken in Britain, they contain Semitic roots. So in the linguistics, you see a genetic connection to this E haplogroup expansion out of East Africa into the Levant and into Europe. So just how the Natufians were Proto-Semitic speakers out of North Africa, you can see that the early inhabitants of Britain were Proto-Semitic speakers out of North Africa as well. The evidence for this are the insular Celtic languages found on the west coast of Ireland and in Wales. And the reason why they are isolated is because those populations were pushed into seclusion by the invading Indo-Europeans from the east. And that's why the insular Celtic languages are found on the western parts of Britain. Interestingly enough, those that speak and preserve the insular Celtic languages are slightly more melanated and have slightly curlier hair than their surrounding Celtic brethren, indicating a genetic lineage, a genetic remembrance of those more melanated ancestors. Let's compare some anthropological and sociological evidence here. You happen to have a movement in Britain right now that's called Not Celtic, where the white people of Britain are denying the Celtic lineage because they are discovering that their Indo-European ancestors are not the Celts, supporting everything that I just stated, that these Celts are from ancestral black stock. And the modern Europeans are even starting to acknowledge that with a movement called Not Celtic. I mean, this is so important. This is so important. Oh, let me work on my lighting here. There we go. Right? So this is important. The insular Celtic languages show this African origin. The phenotypes and ethnology of the people speaking these insular Celtic languages point back to an African origin. And we know the Egyptians were mining tin in Britain. That's what brought the Dravidians to Iran. When I spoke about Carl H. Mengiz from the Journal of Turkic Studies, showing that the Dravidians had a center in Iran, those Dravidians in Iran were mining lapis lazuli, right? That blue gem that was so popular in Egypt and Sumeria. They're cousins. So we see that the search for minerals is partly what drives our human migration patterns as well. And it was the lapis lazuli from Iran that was mined by these Dravidians of Nubia that got traded and shipped back into Mesopotamia, into the Nile Valley. And it's the mining for minerals, for tin, that brought the Egyptians, E haplogroup, up into Britain, where they have found an Egyptian burial. They identified the beadwork as Egyptian, right? They found an Egyptian shipwreck off of the islands of Britain. The Scottish oral tradition, the Scots say they are from Egypt. The Scottish oral tradition even remembers this E haplogroup African expansion into Britain. The Scottish say they are named after Scotia, an Egyptian princess. Well, we found an Egyptian shipwreck off the islands of Britain. We found Egyptian burials off the islands of Britain. The insular Celtic languages contain Proto-Semitic linguistics, all North African. So when you look into the history and ethnology of Britain, it is all North African. Just like when you look into the ethnology and history of Sumeria and India, it is all East African. This African firstness amongst peoples that I've been mounting up, this colossus that will shade us from the heat of white supremacy. Right? These things are important. So not only did our African ancestors migrate north into Europe, not only did they migrate east into India, Asia, Iran, they also migrated west into the Atlantic, bringing them to the Americas. Right? Now I want to talk about the Olmecs, right? So let's cite another source. The historian, linguist, and translator Leo Werner of Humboldt University of Berlin was the first, not the only, he was the first to connect the Olmec writing to the Mandee people in volume 3 of his book, The Discovery of America, the African and the Discovery of America, noting that the Mandee writing was analogous meaning same as. Mandee writing was analogous to the inscriptions found on the Tuxtla statuette in Mexico. So the value of these linguists are important, so important, right? We mentioned the linguist Carl H. Menges, right, in his Journal of Turkic Studies, pointing out how the Dravidians were centered in Iran. Now this linguist, Leo Werner, is illustrating for us that in Mexico, on the Tuxtla statuette, you find Mandee writing, right? So I don't know what that does for tribes and charts, and you could throw that out the window. Right? Because it is Mandee writing that we find on these Tuxtla statuettes in Mexico that is connected to the Olmec culture. Right? The Olmecs, that was the first high civilization of North America, right, and Central America. Right? And the later Amerindian cultures and technologies descend from the Olmec culture. Right? The name Olmec means rubber people. And the Nahuatl Aztecs, the Nahuatl speaking Aztecs, called them Olmec. That is an exonym. The Olmec did not call themselves Olmecs. Right? What is the Olmec endonym or inside name? The name they called themselves. They called themselves She. The She people, XI, as in Mexico, that She, XI, is from these Olmec peoples, right? What cultural continuities did the Olmecs share with their African ancestors? Well, they used an African practice known as facial scarification, right? Practiced in West Africa, identical to such as the Dinka and Yoruba, right? They had African hairstyles, right? They were wearing cornrows. That's found on many of the Olmec terracotta found in Mexico. And the Olmecs practiced a religion and astronomical science identical to those practiced in Africa, in the Mali and Nigeria regions. And I want to highlight this astronomical science, right? This astronomical science that is of the Mali and Nigeria region. Why? Because we've all heard of that the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar as I just spoiled, right, is really based off of the Olmec calendar. That Mayan calendar was not created by the Mayans. The Mayan calendar was loaned to them culturally by the Olmecs. The Mayan calendar originated as the Olmec calendar. And that calendar was formed off of astronomical science from the Mali and Nigeria regions. This African lineage is so important. When we hear about the histories and greatness of these other peoples, China's great accomplishments, the jade, this, that, and the third, not realizing that the Xia and Shang of China were black people. You hear about the Mayan calendar, it foretold this, that, and the third, not knowing that that Mayan calendar is really the Olmec calendar that used astronomical science and observations from Mali and Nigeria. So they rip our history right away from us. They rip our legacy right away from us. They rip our scientific advancement right away from us. The idea that we are a scientifically literate people, the idea that we are a scientifically empowered people. We created these sciences. How we need colleges, we the knowledge that fathered this. Right? So these things are extremely important. Extremely important. And yes, you do find Semitic inscriptions over here. You do find Canaanite inscriptions over here that they misnomer as Phoenician or they misnomer as Paleo-Hebrew. You have to go through 3 levels of misnomers, right? The term Paleo-Hebrew is a misnomer for the term Phoenician. But then Phoenician is also a misnomer or exonym for the Canaanites. Because the Phoenicians did not call themselves Phoenicians. That is a Greek term. The Greeks called them Phoenicians. What did the Phoenicians call themselves? What is the endonym or inside name that the Phoenicians called themselves? Kenanu, Canaanites. So when you find Paleo-Hebrew in the Americas, that is Canaanite. Because yes, the Canaanites, these black peoples of North African descent, did come to the Americas. Just like every high civilization that was in control of North Africa. That was a hallmark of being in control of North Africa. You controlled the trade to the Americas. You controlled the Atlantic trade to the Americas. That's why you find Egyptians over here. That's why you find Canaanite Phoenician over here. That's why Mansa Musa's brother Abu Bakari came over here. That's why the Moors came over here. All population groups that ruled Northwest Africa. So this is a cultural tradition, right? Being in control of Northwest Africa meant being in control of the trade and the routes to the Americas. And we see when the Europeans defeated the Moors and took over the Moorish territories, what did the Europeans gain control of? The route to the Americas. So we see how this lineage of controlling the route to the Americas passed down from black hand to black hand until it got passed down or taken by white hands. All of these things correlate. Whew. So I know this is a large mountain, right? This is definitely a large colossus that we are building here. But again, it is for our own benefit because we have been sweltering under the heat of white supremacy. So we need to find solace and comfort in the shadow of this colossus that is our African primacy. But it's not just from Africa through the Atlantic that black people populated the Americas. Those Melanesians of Oceania that I spoke about, right, that populate Malaysia and the Admin Islands, Solomon Islands, and Australia, right? These Australoids of Oceania carrying the C haplogroup, they did not stop at Australia. They kept going. And they also populated South America, right? Developing Norte Chico, the oldest civilization in South America. That's why I specifically mentioned that the Olmecs, with their West African lineage, was the oldest civilization in North and Central America. I was saving South America because the Olmec were not the first civilization in South America. Norte Chico was, established by these Melanesians of Oceania, related to the Australoids, or Australasians, as they are sometimes called. What the genetic evidence has shown is that some of the indigenous Aboriginal peoples of South America still carry that Australian DNA. Cultural continuities, the Melanesians are not a literate people. What makes Norte Chico so special is that it is the only megalithic civilization that was formed without writing. When we talk about Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, they had writing. When we talk about Sumer, they had writing. When we talk about Kemet, Kush, they had writing. The Shang, they had writing. The Greeks, the Romans, the Etruscans, Minoans, they had writing. Norte Chico, the first civilization of South America, had no writing. Why is that? Because the black population that they sprang forth from were not a literate people. The Melanesians. They also are not a literate people. These people of Melanesia and Oceania are island-dwelling people, meaning they are not heavy on agriculture. You know what else makes Norte Chico so unique? Its civilization is also not attributed to the introduction of agriculture, providing surplus, leaving a leisure class to create artisans and specialists. That's not what happened in Norte Chico either. They were not big agriculturalists because their Melanesian ancestors are not agriculturalists. We also see that the little bit of agriculture that they did grow, the crops that they did grow, same as the Melanesian crops that they grow. Heavy on fish in Melanesia, heavy on fish in Norte Chico. And the genetic remnants of these oceanic Melanesians still exist in South American indigenous populations to this day. The genetic evidence is there. The cultural continuities are there. So the Americas were populated by these black Australasians, as they're called, these black Melanesians carrying the C haplogroup. Then also African Mandi speakers, as I stated with the Olmec. So I'm gonna conclude there, right? We've covered the Americas, we've covered Northern Europe, we've covered Southern Europe, we've covered the Levant with the Natufians, we've covered Mesopotamia with the Natufians and the Dravidians, right? Those Dravidians that are former Niger-Congo speakers. We've covered Iran, we've covered Southeast Asia with the Khmer, we've covered China, right? This African firstness amongst peoples. We've broken it down to the haplogroups. How the E haplogroup brought Proto-Semitic into Britain, which you can still find the remnants of in the insular Celtic languages. There's an entire movement by white people in Britain called Not Celtic, because they know that those early Celts are East African E haplogroup Proto-Semitic speakers. We've covered the L2 and L3 haplogroup of the M Dravidian migration, the C haplogroup of those Australoids, those Melanesians that populated South America. Right? So thank you for giving me this time, right, to build this colossus for us. Right? Thank you, Unity. Thank you for the listeners. I'm your brother God Energy. Right, and we'll be back for another one. We'll expand on all of these topics, because everything that I've mentioned here, I have pages and pages and pages of notes with even more outside
Starting to break
information
up a little bit
to discover this. Oh, I'm sorry. Testing. Mic check. Mic check. Right? So we can come back with a part 2 to add even more linguistic and anthropological details to this. Thank you, Unity. If there's anyone that wants to come up for Q&A,
okay.
I'm here.
I know Krabs was up here and Jamal had to go. Krabs is trying to get back up here.
Okay.
I don't see him yet, but we've got, I think, about 5 or 6 people still left in here. So anybody in here, I'm going to put the link back down here. Just click the link, and then you can come up. It's just like Bigo. Same thing.
I was about to ask Unity, do you have any questions? You know what I mean? But I know you own ancient and modern Britons, so I was about to say, Unity, you want to teach us something? Shoot.
I think you explained it. I can't break it down like you could break it down. Okay. I appreciate it. Okay. Reparations. He says, thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Is anybody going to come up? Anyone?
If not, we could conclude.
Yeah, if not, we're just going to go ahead and end it.
That's good. Maybe we could do a open discussion one where we start off with 3 or 4 people. That also would be cool one day. Oh, also too, this information, right? Some of these stuff that I've sourced, like from historian, linguist Leo Werner and stuff like that. When I talked about Manfred Biatek, when I talked about Roland Dixon, this information is available on the pamphlets that I make here. The one of them that I showed with Greece. But I have a series of pamphlets here, right, covering these different ancient civilizations. If anyone is interested in these pamphlets, reach out to Unity. She could get them to you or connect you with me, and I'll get them to you. Reach out to me on Bigo. You know what I mean? I have a YouTube channel, God_energy. I do have a YouTube channel. You can reach out to me on my YouTube channel. Follow my YouTube channel. Check out what I got going on over there. But, I have information for the people so we can begin this re-education process for ourselves. I'm more than happy to share this information with you folks. And if anyone wants to, become accountable and take on a leadership position in their community, I would love to provide you with a stock of pamphlets for you to then distribute yourself. Of course, once you familiarize yourself with the pamphlets and information. But anyone who wants to become a harbinger of this information, please reach out to me. Anyone who wants to join, the movement that we have going on, please reach out to me. I'm not suited up here with my tactical vest on for no reason. We have a uniform. We have a unified culture. We have these bangles here. We have this tactical chest rig here because we are creating uniformity, right? So if you want to get involved, if you are looking for cohesion, a brotherhood, you know what I mean, a family with this, we do put in the work. You know what I mean? When the electronics turn off, right? And if anyone is interested in getting involved and putting in the work once the electronics turn off, please reach out to me. I'm accepting all comers, all family members, right? Everyone of the melanated family. Please reach out to me, and we will get you suited and booted, right? We have the uniform here. We have the bangles here. We have the information here, right? Please reach out because there are things going on when the electronics turn off, and you are welcome to get involved. You are welcome to channel that energy, that feeling that you have that something needs to be done, that feeling that you have looking for what can you do when this system is so big, when the problem is so big, right? Here is a start. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me, reach out to Unity, follow my YouTube page, subscribe to her YouTube page, like the video, comment, and, you know, get yourself involved because these things are happening and it is the greatest fulfillment in the world.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a connection error. Let's see. Okay. So does anybody want to come up? Wait a minute. What does reparations say? Reparations. Has anyone ever traced Masa Musa's bloodline for lineage?
Yeah, they were connected to the Mansas. They are a Mandi people, Malinke people, Soninke people. Sub-Saharan Africans.
Can you see these when I'm putting them on the screen? God energy?
I cannot. The font is way over there.
Okay, so it looks like reparations said someone once told me that there was a pyramid in the Americas. Can you validate?
Yeah. There are plenty of pyramids in the Americas. You can find pyramids at La Venta, the Olmec Center, right? The Olmec centered their civilization at La Venta in Mexico, and you can find pyramids there. But then you can find pyramids that aren't associated with the Olmec culture as well. Like in South America, they use satellite imagery and radar to find the pyramids that had been covered up by the jungles there. You know what I mean? And it's funny because before the Spaniards had colonized the Americas, there were a few European explorers that came over here first, and they described bustling civilizations in South America with pyramids and stuff like that. And only by 100 or 200 years later, during the time of Christopher Columbus and them, they didn't see any of that stuff. And that's because the jungle had covered it all up already. You know what I mean? And it is supposed that those civilizations that the early explorers saw had died because those explorers left behind diseases that those Americans weren't used to. And those populations died from those diseases from the American explorers. And then when European explorers. Then when the European colonists came, those civilizations had already been overgrown by the jungles. So you can find pyramids in the Americas in multiple regions.
Looks like, lastly, does Walgreens have any idea who they have in their midst? I don't get that.
One or two of them does, but
what?
I'm a best kept secret in a lot of realms that I walk in. My entire city doesn't know who they have in their midst.
Look, I'm like, what? Okay, let me see. Okay, so the truth, she says, thankful for you. Reparations. Other than South America, I meant.
What does he mean? Other than South America means still talking about the Americas? Yeah, La Venta. Yeah, I mentioned La Venta in where the Olmecs were centered at.
Did that answer your question, reparations? Or I'm sorry, Robert Taylor.
And again, you can find pyramids all over the world. You know what I mean? Whether they're variations of the step pyramid.
I know we have some here in Kentucky. They just look like mounds.
Right, right. And a lot of the early pyramid constructions were formed off of mounds, mound building. Right? If they weren't done from mastabas, if they weren't done by mastaba, meaning stacking one rectangular structure on top of another, becoming progressively smaller as you get to the top, some other pyramids were formed over mounds. That is 100% correct. And a lot of these practices, our melanated family brought with them around the world, right? That's why you see cattle veneration in so many different cultures, because the ancestors of these people are sub-Saharan Africans, sub-Saharan African pastoralists, right? So there are many cultural and there are many cultural things that you see brought across the globe by this melanated family.
All right, did that answer your question, reparations? Let's see. I think that answered his question. Anybody else have any questions?
And just to finish off, right, when I spoke about those Natufians of 9,000 BC that started agriculture, that came out of Northwest Africa, that brought the Proto-Semitic language with them, these peoples are the ancestors of the Canaanites. These people are the ancestors of those Phoenicians, right? The ancestors of people who would later be known as Israelites, Judites, Moabites, and things like that.
Okay, let me see. I think I have another one. Wait a minute. Hold on. Uh-oh. I know. Okay. If I put my pom-poms down, will you add me on Bigo? That's the truth. How do we use this information to make it through Armageddon? That's a question.
Armageddon already happened. It was the Battle of Megiddo, where one of the Israelite kings fell, and they called it Armageddon because it was the end of the world for them. So Armageddon is based off of Megiddo, and Armageddon references the Battle of Megiddo, where the Egyptians had subdued Canaanite or Israelite forces. So Armageddon already happened. We made it through unscathed, right? We are all still here. And what this does is empower us, and it gets rid of our low self-esteem and sense of inferiority. So we can then become empowered enough to take control of our own destiny and be proactive in our current situation and not reactive to our oppression, right? And us being proactive would be us getting more involved in civics, like I mentioned the Black Panthers did, right? And this civics will then bring a better quality of life as we become the people that control the societal institutions around us, like schools, hospitals, court systems, the manufacturing of goods, and the distribution of agriculture. So all of this empowerment to erase low self-esteem would hope to motivate people to become active in bettering our lives through civic action and Black ownership. I'll leave you with that.
All right, looks like next question. Who built the pyramids and how? That's from Crabs.
Which pyramids? Who built the pyramids? You mean the pyramids in Egypt? We can reference the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus. We can reference the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus, which was found at a port in Wadi al-Jarf, of course, right? And it is a historical account. It is a day-by-day, meaning they recorded their day-to-day actions in half-day increments, right? And what this is a recordation of is the artisan team that was led by the Vizier Merer, right? And what this team was doing was leaving from that port to go get the last bit of stone that they needed to finish the pyramids of Khufu. So the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus, right, is the primary piece of evidence that cites the exact figures, right, that were responsible for finishing the construction of the pyramids. My brother, great in question. I didn't think I'd talk about the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus today.
Okay, let's see. Reparations, yes. Can you speak to the purpose of some... Oh, here comes Crab, so let me add him to the stream. Can you speak to the purpose of some of the pyramids? Some say they were tools for astrology. Some say they for the pharaoh burial. Did Dr. Phil Valentine once indicate they were used to steer the planet?
Yeah, right. A lot of speculation, pseudo, you know what I mean? Very, very good question though. Very good question though, right? And what we see with those pyramids, right? There aren't too many burials associated with the Great Pyramids, the largest pyramids. You know what I mean? You don't see too much burials associated with them, even though you can find a casket here or there, a tomb here or there. You know what I mean? But it seems like, and the term pyramid is Greek for fire in the middle, right? Pyra, fire, middle, right? So in that term, you get a little bit of an inference into the function of these pyramids that had fire in the middle. But they were also surrounded by water at some point. So you see water with this thing that has fire in the middle that is capped by metal, right? And then it has inner chambers, almost as if to facilitate the flow of something, right? And that's as far as I'll go with that. Because not all pyramids are constructed in that way, right? And the first step pyramid constructed by Imhotep, right, the first multi-genius known on the planet, he did so by stacking mastabas on top of each other. And mastabas were long-used Egyptian dwellings already. So this multi-genius known as Imhotep looked at a mastaba and said, what if I stack a slightly smaller mastaba on top of that one, and kept going? And that's how the first step pyramids were formed, by stacking Egyptian constructions known as mastabas on top of each other. And that's how the first step pyramids were formed. Later on, you get the Great Pyramids of the Giza Plateau. Later on, you get that style of construction.
Okay. Let's see. How much time do you spend studying daily?
Sheesh. At least 2 hours.
At least 2 hours. Okay. Let's see. Okay, this is Krabs. He said Khufu. So I guess we'll expound on that in just a second. Let's see what else. Okay, how does this information help us survive World War III?
I said it already. That seems like a redundant question. I answered that already.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Can you elaborate on the Oceanic period and what was civilization like?
I I mentioned the Oceania. I mentioned Oceania, which is a region of islands inhabited by the Melanesians, right? It encompasses Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, right? Australia is in there as well, and that is the area known as Oceania. It is below Southeast Asia, right? And it's inhabited by the people that are classified as Melanesians from the two Greek words Melos and Nisoi. Melos meaning black, Nisoi meaning islands. So Melanesian literally means black islands, right? And it's these peoples that would migrate into the Americas and South America. It's these peoples that would migrate across the Beringer Strait. When we talk about people coming across the Beringer Strait through near Siberia and Alaska and down into the Americas, they're talking about these Melanesians of Oceania, you know? And what you see is that these peoples of Oceania, they are some of the first peoples to migrate out of Africa around 30,000 BCE. So they have a long-standing history and lineage. You know what I mean? And they have what was I about to say? Their inhabitants there was disrupted by migrants out of Taiwan, the Polynesians, right? These Polynesian peoples, they stem from Taiwan, and they sweep through Oceania and Melanesia, and then they establish their settlements where they are, like in Hawaii and Fiji and stuff like that. And they did very little mixing with the Melanesians of Melanesia. You see very little genetic intermixing with the Polynesians and the Melanesians, showing that the Polynesians, when they came, they swept through, killed who they needed to kill, and they didn't really intermix with the Melanesians that much. The Melanesians of Oceania.
Okay, it looks like the truth is saying flow of energy, power, electricity, question mark, question mark, question mark. I don't know if that's a, well, I mean, I guess it's a question.
It's more speculation back to the pyramids. It's more speculation back to the pyramids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Last question here. How do we apply this information to today and survival?
I said it already with the inspiration of being proactive and taking civic action and all that stuff. Once this person rewatches, they'll see what I said about how it's relevant to today.
Okay. All right, Krabs, welcome to the feed. You can unmute yourself.
Peace, Krabs.
What's good, brother?
What's good, man?
Nothing much. Man, you already know. You already know where I'm going, right? Because like, okay, the specific pyramid that I was talking about was the pyramid of Khufu, and if you said the Anunnaki, that's all myth. There's no reality to that at all, right?
Like Zeus?
No. Like, I'm talking about nothing else. I'm talking about the story of the Anunnaki. What the Sumerians wrote down.
Like Odin? Like Odin? Like
no.
Odin and
no.
Thor?
No.
And Loki?
No.
Like Zeus?
The Anunnaki.
Like Athena?
No.
Like Kronos?
No.
Like Jupiter?
No. Want me to say it again? Like the Anunnaki, because none of those names that you just named were mentioned in the Sumerian tablets. I'm talking about the cuneiform language.
No, but I mean mythology. No, when you said that I deemed the Anunnaki mythology, I said like Zeus, like Odin. That's what I was going off of. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm asking you. But yes. I don't want to think. So you think that it's all fiction?
The story of the Anunnaki is just as historically sound as the story of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set.
Okay. And the Dogon tribe, we spoke about this before. So you believe I think they call it the Amumu?
Yeah, the Dogon are just as real as the Egyptian people, who are just as real as the Sumerian people. All of their mythos are just as factual as each other's.
Okay. Now, the Dogon tribe exists right now. There's been plenty of study on them in real time. So you can't say they are a myth. You can say
no, I said the Dogon exist, just like the Egyptian people exist, just like the Sumerian people exist.
All right. Well, we're kind of combining everything together right now. So let me go ahead and get to my point. If all of that is myth, then the people who live in the land of Kemet, they built the pyramid of Khufu, right? How did they do that? I want you to tell me, because I haven't read the book that you just.
Easy. That's easy through pulley and lever technology. Also, what they find is that the copper tools, when they use the raw copper tools, the copper tools have a problem cutting through the stone. But interestingly enough, one man took the surrounding environment and thought like a native. And what he did was he put sand on top of the block first, adding to the abrasion, and those copper tools cut way more easily through the stone. But aside from that, you also have the obelisks that were left in the stone, right? You have the obelisk that is broke. You can see how the Egyptians were cutting out an obelisk, and then it cracked. So they left that one there, and they moved on. You get what I'm saying? So all of this quarrying, also the Sphinx, actually you have the quarry site for the Sphinx as well. So quarrying, right, and having an entire age named after what you quarry, like the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, which is the Chalcolithic Age, that's 3000 BC and up. All of these ages are named after minerals that were quarried. So quarrying is 100% a human achievable thing, right? Quarrying has never been associated with outside of, so we've been quarrying these stones all the time. Also, I'm gonna let you know that you can take a jack. How big is a jack? A jack is about this big, right? You take that little jack, and what do? You lift up and elevate a 2-ton car. So a simple levee and pulley system also has been demonstrated to build these things. Also, the master. Go ahead, Kratz.
Yeah, good, man. Because now you know that is not right. Lifting one side of a car off of its axis cannot be compared to moving 2.5 million stones for over 538 miles. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because whatever technology that they had, for some reason, we don't have it now. And you're telling me that these people developed that technology over however many years, but everything else, as far as their myths, is well documented. But the technology it took to build these pyramids, we don't have that at all. So I'm like, it's a big gap in here somewhere. Two things can't be true.
A knowledge filter. What you're speaking about is called a knowledge filter. And yes, there are discoveries that are kept from you for specific reasons. We are not told everything. Just like most people don't know that in the British Museum, they have the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin. Dr. Ivan van Sertima was on the phone with the representative from the British Museum. He was on the phone with Sheikh Anta Diop and Sheikh Mokhtar, the Arab delegate of Egypt, and they did not want to release the splinter of the Sphinx's nose and chin, and they have these things. So if you want to dig, we can dig, but I don't want to make the claim of offsetting all of the African primacy haplogroups linguistics to make the conversation and focus about Anunnaki alien in the pyramids, when the scope of this was way more broad and way more human than that. And the purpose of this was to talk about human achievements to empower human beings. And that's kind of what, you know what I mean? And then to make it about aliens and pyramids and aliens and Anunnaki alien pyramid. I mean, that is the redundant, sensationalized, you know what I mean?
But when you start saying that it's all myth, then I find myself having to disagree with you. Because I do believe there was an intervention. I believe something intervened with us. And my whole reason for saying that is that was just not the human technology of copper tools that cut and quarry those stones from over 538.
We had, and I'm glad you brought that up, because those people back then had a higher technology than that. White supremacy wants you to believe that those people were primitive and only had a certain level of technology. But as you point out, and as the evidence suggests of the rotary tools, right, the evidence of rotary tools in the granite, our African ancestors did have more advanced technology, and they are not half-evolved monkeys that are ignorant, just like me and you are not half-evolved monkeys that are ignorant and can't achieve high science. So I actually agree with you that what they say was the height of our technology back then is a complete lie. The evidence is that your black African, melanated black African ancestors had a higher technology than they want to admit.
Yeah.
100%.
I get that part. I'm going to have to go
100%.
Excuse me. Yeah, I do get that part. And when I say and when I question where the technology went, it's not to take anything from any beautiful people that look like myself. Not at all.
Also, when I have a build about technology, when we do a build about technology and stuff, that's when this topic is great. This is kind of changing the entire topic of my entire thing beforehand. You know what I mean? I never spoke on technology or constructions or their mythos.
You did kind of, guy. When you brought up the Anunnaki and you said it's all myth, this is where they say they got their technology from. But I'm going to let that go for now.
The Sumerians,
I'm going to plug up.
The Sumerians said that. But I spoke about multiple global peoples that were before that Sumerian culture. You know what I mean?
You said the Sumerians were Cushites. And I believe that the Egyptian or Kemet people were Cushites. So we're in agreement there.
And you see, and it's funny that in that family, no one else in the family is saying that except the isolated pockets of people contextualizing their existence through a teaching story and a theogony, right? So we can't prioritize one theogony over another. And just how you mentioned, those Sumerians are Cushites. Meaning, why aren't we looking to the Nubian story and what they are saying? Because that would make them older, and oldest means most correct. I'm extrapolating that this is your logic. Oldest means most correct. So then let's go to what the oldest peoples are saying, because that's definitely not the Sumerians, even though Zechariah Sitchin, ancient aliens, and modern, pseudo-European scholarship is saying that to take away from the African achievements. This Anunnaki story is to take away from the African achievements, and my entire lecture was to highlight African achievements.
Okay, well, I'll say this, and I hope we can do this here again on this channel, and we can bring up the technology and we can bring up the myth. I'll get my stuff together and get my information together, and we can sit down and we can discuss this. Because the only reason why I got up here is because you brought that up. I wasn't going to get up here, but you brought up the Anunnaki and people looking at them as gods. I don't believe that they're gods, but I believe that something happened. But we'll save that conversation for another time, and we can get into that. Let me go charge my phone and continue listening, brother.
All right. Peace, brother.
All right.
Great day, brother.
Peace, dog.
I got a couple questions for you. first question is that right now we're living in a time span that many people aren't paying attention to, and information is power when applied. So my question is, how is the information that you're sharing today is going to be applied to the survival of what we're confronted with? Like, for example, when you talked about Armageddon, you said that Armageddon was something that occurred before. But if you understand the scriptures of the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, they're 30% history and 70% prophecy or prophetic or predicted by our great scientists and ancestors. So when I'm saying Armageddon, I'm talking about the world war, as every new nation, every new chosen people has had a perishing point. So when you brought the Armageddon in the past, I'm not debating on that, but I'm talking about the present Armageddon we're facing right now.
Yeah. Did you catch everything that I said about being proactive, inspiring us, civic action, institutions, and that type of stuff?
Well, what I'm saying to you, brother, is that what I'm saying is that
no, brother.
Wait a minute.
I asked you a question. I answered. Did you catch that part,
brother?
Did you catch that part?
That's what I'm saying. If civics would be the answer to our questions, then we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. But you're using civics. Wait a minute, brother. So what we're gonna do first and foremost, I've been on here for a couple minutes and I haven't opened my mouth. I didn't say not one word while you and other brother was talking. So I would respect you and I ask a question, and you can respect me to let me finish what I'm saying, and then you can reply. Civics and the systems and the religions and everything we have to date is not working. Point blank. So what I'm asking you is that how can you apply the information you're sharing with us that will help us to survive the strange days we're presently living in right now?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. Now, civics to me is not working, because if it was working, it would be working. You're looking at a system that was devised by a treacherous person, and you're saying we're going to use it. But how can you use treachery in a righteous manner? So I'm saying I need you to express to me how the information you're sharing, we're going to use that to survive World War III. Because Germany will soon be in war, and we as an American population is going to support Germany, and thousands are going to go to Germany, and the draft will be starting soon. So I'm asking you, how can you apply your information? Right. I'm not debating your information of how we're going to survive this Great Depression, how we're going to survive this present Armageddon or / World War III.
That's on me now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I love how all of the concerns that you referenced were civic, like the draft, war. This is civics that you mentioned as the problem, while implying that us employing our own civics has nothing to do with this problem that you are characterizing with civic examples. So I'm going to be redundant and restate that us taking our destiny into our own hands, right? Independence, and employing our own civics. I'm not saying work for the system. I'm not saying do that. I'm saying us having our own, right? And us owning our own. However that may look, whether it is here in America amongst each other, or if we have a grand exodus like Moses, and if we have to bust a head open like David, and maintain our wisdom like Solomon, and die for it like Jesus, through the power and will of the Most High, right? Taking these civic actions into our own hands and being proactive instead of reactive. These things will help us. And I went into more detail earlier, but just as a generalization and overview, my brother, in a sense. But also, this build and information wasn't on that topic. So I'm kind of being forced to make an equivocation fallacy because you are making an equivocation fallacy. And that question that you asked kind of wasn't the point of this build. This build was for something else. And my answer and notes and plans to answer what your question was is out of the green book. All of this information came out of my black book.
Let me ask you a question, brother. Can you eat civics? Can you drink civics?
Agricultural programs are, yeah, I said producing our own food and things earlier. That's why I said I don't think you heard me earlier. But if you go back and listen when you first asked this 3 times in the comments, I did incorporate food, owning our own food production act. I did mention these things. I think the term Africa is more at the root of this conversation with me and you. Just like Anunnaki and saying myth was at the root of the other brother's conversation with me. And that both of these conversations are completely off topic and off track from what I just laid down and that information. You know what I mean?
No, sir, I think you're missing my point. It's what I'm trying to get you to understand. What I'm saying to you is that the purpose of studying information of any form of information is to be able to apply it. So if you're going to teach me about and you're going to share the information about all the ancient things that we did, how can we apply them today? You're talking in a generalized manner. We got to do this. I'm asking you for a way to tell me that what is the depth of us being able to survive the days we're in. So if you take the information that you shared from way back here, from all the ancient things, how can you bring them forward to use today? Because right now they're talking about the eggs. They're talking about getting rid of the beefs. They're talking about Bill Gates and buying the land. And so what is the application of the information so we can move forward? That's what I'm trying to understand, bro. I'm not knocking what you shared. I'm not saying any of the information you said was wrong. I'm just saying, how do I apply that, right? Like, for example, you said Armageddon had already happened. And I'm saying, well, if Armageddon already happened, how come we're living in Revelations now? And I'm not a spiritual person, but I'm just sharing the historical part and the prophetic part. You can't say what I am or ain't because you don't know me, brother. What I'm saying to you is a simple thing, is that do you agree that we're coming to, supposedly so many people saying we're about to come into famine? Do you agree that the pestilence is the corona? This is not spiritual or religious.
Biblical terms, all biblical terms, though.
Biblical historical terms. Now, some people take them as metaphysical. Wait a minute, brother. Wait a minute. Some people take them as spooky terms. I take them as prophetic terms, not spooky.
That's also
it's your concept of it. But my concept is that what if we had to go to the store tomorrow and there's nothing in the store? How can we apply the teachings that our ancestors left us to be to give us guidance with structure to survive? That's what my question is, brother. I have been listening to you for a while since I was invited on. I've been listening for a while, way before I sent the questions. I'm saying to apply your information. Your information was great. I'm asking you, how can we apply it? You're saying through civics. Well, we have civics. It ain't working. Detailed ways. How, brother? Take it to the next level. How? That's like some old lady right now watching you. She need to know she needs to start stocking water. She need to know she needs to start stocking dry foods. She need to know she started trying to get different ways of cooking in case let you go out. That's what I'm saying, brother.
Whew. Those are actually 2 different topics, right? That's what I'm saying. There's an equivocation fallacy here. And I'm fine with that. And I also mentioned in detail some things earlier. If you rewatch, you may pick it up, you may not. I'm not invested in that. But thank you for your question. And I'm sure the Most High will actually put those in accordance and in place for you and everyone that you love. You know, and as long as you, my brother, you worship the Most High and bow down to the Most High, I'm sure He will carry you through the Armageddon, my brother.
Well, I don't worship the Most High, brother.
Thank you.
That's why I said you earlier. I don't worship the Most High. What I understand is America has been fighting in a war, lying as it's the Ukraine, and we're under a situation where we may be out of food. We may be out of water in the next year or so. We're going to have a draft in the next year or so. That's not got nothing to do with religion or Most High. That's got to do with
all that also has little. All that also has little to do with the information I brought, except if you extrapolate the steps that they took, right? Like when I mentioned Herodotus saying that Osiris inundated the land, water led to agriculture. Those gems were in there. I think a different motive may come out of this, but also that term, that question is completely off topic to what I'm saying. And it's asked to imply that everything you just said doesn't matter to our situation. So the point of you asking that was to nullify and imply that everything I just said is not relevant because it doesn't help us in Armageddon. That is the point of your question. That was the subtext. And
that's not the point of my question, brother. That's not the point of my question. The point of my question is that the reason why our ancestors left us these different teachings, listen, brother, the reason why our ancestors left us these different teachings is actually because they were leaving us guidance to make it through these days. So I'm asking you to take all the things you said and bring them into these days so we can use as guidance to survive these days. That's what I'm saying. Ain't got nothing to do with the Most High because I'm not Hebrew. So you don't have to keep saying it. Like, for example, you have your vest on, right? What's the purpose of a vest? To protect you, right? So you said earlier you had a group, an organization. That's why you had your vest on. Okay, well, are you... So when we look at the metanative, look at metanative. Huh? What you say, bro?
Nothing, my brother. The projection is clear, but continue. I don't want to interrupt.
What I'm saying to you is that at the end of the day, all these things that we can study from the ancient ancestors, just like if you read an almanac. If you're a farmer and you don't read an almanac, it doesn't make sense. Because the almanac is thousands of years of cycles put together to understand certain weather patterns, certain seasons. The same way everything our ancestors left us has the same purpose, to be able to guide us through these days. Now, some people are Hebrews, some people are Muslims, some people are Kemetic science. But if you really put those things together, they all kind of teaching the same thing, which is giving you similar to an almanac to prepare you for the days we are facing now. So people need to be storing water. People need to be storing dry goods. People need to be practicing. People need to be buying armor. So what I'm saying is that I like you to link all the important information you shared and how the information collaborates with us being prepared to make it through the next day. That's all I'm saying. I'm not knocking anything you said. You're taking it that way. I'm not putting it that way, brother.
Thank you.
You understand? Like when you talked about the pyramids, and you said the pyramids are on the whole earth on the north-south axis. They were recently used in space travel. There's no such thing as aliens. Those are our ancient ancestors. Because the earth is 66 to 70 trillion years old. We have been conditioned to think the earth is 6,000 years old. That's a lie. The earth is somewhere between 66 and 70 trillion years old. That's why you look at the Bible things, it says we are, before us it was none, after us be no more. We are older than anything that can be used to write. But in the same sense, all the systems, if you study them, they all are preparing us for something that's happening in the present. Not in the past, not in the future, but right now. So as a people, we need to be having beans. We need to be having water. We need to be coming together in grouping. We need to hear the information you're sharing, but collaborate that with today. That's all I'm saying. So I agree with what you say. I listen to you talking about all the ancient things. I can't debate with you because I don't have studies on those things. But I'm saying, how can you bring that into today and to have the people to say, hey, are you stocking water? Are you stocking food? Are you going out here exercising? Are you ready to be able to go to war? Because we're in those days. Would you agree? Would you agree that right now we're fighting Ukraine? The American government took over Ukraine in 2014. American government took over the Taiwan many years ago. So the war in China is really a war against America. The war in Ukraine is a war against America. And now soon the war will be in Germany. And once the war hits Germany, we're going to have a draft. So take your information and bring it so that people can take the information of how our ancestors left us guidance for these days. That's all I'm saying. I'm not knocking what you said. I'm just saying tie it in to the survival of these days.
You know what I mean?
Go ahead.
Thank you for admitting that you didn't know or have a large reference for most of the stuff I was bringing, and that you wished me to incorporate information that you would be familiar with. But the point of my conversation wasn't to spoon feed what you are comfortable with. And if you were unfamiliar with everything that I stated, good, because now I just familiarized you. But I am not required to cater the information or tweak it or add a different context just so you can hear something you're familiar with. And I understand what you are projecting right now. And even that's why I invited people to contact me privately. And I did point out this tactical vest, because some of the things you're talking about, I would like to speak to my people personally about, because it had nothing to do with the specific context and body of information I was putting out. I was purposely separating the two conversations. You get what I mean? And people are welcome to contact me so we can have that conversation that you're talking about. Because that is a conversation I prefer to have in private, in uniformity, right? So there's an equivocation fallacy I'm being forced into at your request. Though I don't deny the conversation you're talking about. I have that conversation and I act on that conversation all the time. But we were having a different conversation here. Peace, light, and love to you, my brother.
Okay, peace, Rob. Let me say this last thing. Okay, I appreciate what you said. But first and foremost, I didn't say I didn't have understanding. I was trying my very best to give you the utmost respect. Because many things you said I totally disagree with. But there's many things I said that was fine. Like when you talked about certain aspects of the pyramids, you talked about certain aspects of aliens and different things, whatever you went into. I didn't say I wasn't well versed, brother. Wait a minute, hey, brother. Did I not be quiet? Hey, brother. Did I not be quiet while you was talking, brother?
Hey, guys, come on.
Right? Did I not be quiet while you was talking, brother? Did I not be quiet while you was talking, right? So what I'm saying, so let me get my piece. But you don't have to verify, brother. I said, look, brother, listen, brother. I sat here and listened to you talk. So now it's your turn to listen to me talk. What I said to you is that I tried my very best to give you the utmost respect by saying what I said. I never said that I didn't have information. I didn't ever say I was well studied. I've been studying for 30, 40 years, brother. I've studied Metanity extensively. I've studied Islam extensively. I've studied Christianity, Judaism, and every other thing that I could find. I've read Asaka Mary Shango, and you name them. I've studied from them, brother. I'm 50-some years old, brother. So, wait, no, brother. Did I talk while you was talking, brother? So what I'm saying to you is that I hear you in the information, but what I'm saying is that we're in a day. Like, for example, I didn't ask you to share your militia or your military or your plans for your organization. I said, is it a way that you could take the powerful information that you've shared and use that to link to the people, to let the people know that we're living in a strange day? That let the people know that, hey, you can need to stock water. I'm not talking about your group. Whatever group you have with your vest and stuff, and you do your secret things. I'm talking about the masses of us. We're not getting water. We're not buying food. We're not seeking information. So all I was saying is that all the powerful information that you shared, could you tie it to let people know that these ancestors left us information for a purpose, for guidance to make it through these days? That's all I was saying, brother. But you saying, well, hey, this, that. You don't know my level of knowledge, brother. I was just trying to give you the utmost respect by saying, hey, I appreciate you, blah, 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 because I didn't come on here to debate with you on that subject. I didn't go like that, dude. Go. But don't denounce me as well, because you have no understanding of where my knowledge is, brother. So say like I'm not denouncing you. That's why I kept giving you uppers. I kept saying, hey, you're great information. Hey, you this and that. I never not once said anything negative. All I said was any aspect of information that we have from our elders, it's guidance to be able to survive. We are the original people. Our elders didn't write books and give us all this information just to study it without having a purpose behind it. And that purpose behind it was that we will always survive. So God has sent us messengers and preachers and teachers and parables because those are the things that God sent us so we could survive. Because we're the original people, have been here for 66 or 70 trillion years, and we're going to be here forever. But we have an enemy. So when we study, no matter what form you study, it gives you guidance of being able to survive. So I'm just saying, some way throughout, before it's all said and done, let the people know, get your water, get your beans, get your dry goods. Understand that I'm teaching this information to boost you.
I don't have to tell them that because you want me to say that like that. You know what I mean? It's very.
What is the purpose of the information? What is the purpose of the information if it doesn't give us survival and guidance, brother?
I never said that it doesn't play a part in that, but you are specifically dictating that I specifically say specific sentences that you prefer, and that's just a little dictatorial. Though I understand your logic, right? Fully understand your logic about making information relevant and applicable, right? And I believe that's at the core of your message, to connect how this information is applicable.
Yes, sir.
Understood. Understood, noted, will do.
Yes, sir.
So maybe we could just have a whole nother live where we talk about that.
Yes, that's a different conversation. This whole conversation and presentation was geared towards a specific topic and thing, and then it's like, well, over here. Okay, if that's what you're familiar with and want to hear, that is the next conversation.
Hey, bro, okay. Let me ask you a question, bro. Let me ask you one last question before I get off, right? And I'll let you finish, right? If I go to a homeless person, right, and I want to teach them about any kind of system, but they hungry, right? If I don't teach them first or get them a sandwich first, they're not going to hear any information I have because the hunger pain is going to overwhelm their thought. So if right now we as a black people that have been attacked and water upon, we've been water upon by so many different angles. So no matter what we do, it's not about what I'm asking you to do. It's about the reality that we want to survive as a people. Yes. If we want to survive as a people, then everything we do has to be based on us being able to survive. I don't care what you teach or how you teaching. It still has to have some kind of teaching to be end result survival. That's all I'm saying, brother. You keep talking about, well, I want you to talk. No, you're missing the thing. The thing is that isn't the end result for us to make it? So the information that you're teaching, isn't it to help us to make it? Isn't it to help us to survive? Isn't it to help us to save our people? Why would you teach if it's not about saving the people? Why would you teach anything if it's not about the love of your people and the survival of your people? No matter if you teach them math, you teach them math so they can get a job and survive.
Everything I just spoke wasn't for that. Everything I just said wasn't for that and does not apply because I didn't say get water and beans. Everything else that I just laid down has zero value then in that respect.
Well, what I'm saying is that you gave us a history thing, but you didn't talk anything about survival. And you didn't link it to today. That's all I asked. You didn't link it to today. Okay, well, you said history, but you didn't link the history to today and how it affects us today. That's all.
Somebody asked a question. Let's see. Well, made a statement. Let's see. You have to know the past to understand the present. Wait a minute. I'm losing my comments. How do I?
Were you here? Let me also ask a question real quick, brother. Were you here for the entire presentation?
I was not here for the entire presentation. I was here since I was invited.
I
didn't hear the entire thing.
Okay, wait, hold. Can I speak real quick? I would like to now apologize then, right? Because I actually did make certain references and comparisons two things being applicable today and the history. I actually did make multiple metaphors and references to the history and then its relevance and application today. And I stated it earlier on in my presentation as an analogy metaphor, and I went into it a little bit and then got back to my history, and you were invited at a specific time and might not have caught that. And I, because I know I stated it, felt the redundancy in the whole situation, so I did not want to have patience for it. But, and at risk of being redundant again, when you go rewatch this, you'll see where I did make those comparisons. And I have tried to say that to you multiple times as well, brother, that maybe rewatching this, looking for those things, you'll hear it. And I do acknowledge that you weren't here the whole time. So I do acknowledge that there may be specific information you're looking for that you may have missed. Because I did make reference to it, and that's why I felt there was redundancy here. You know what I mean? But I would love to continue this I believe you said that was your last question and statement, right? I would love to continue this with us next time. Maybe you, me, and the brother Krabs can actually talk about Anunnaki, aliens, and how irrelevant certain history is without linking it to today. I would love to follow up. Unity is here all the time for us. I actually have to go eat and get my kids now. You know what I mean? So
can I ask one small question?
Black power to you, my brother.
One small question, brother.
Hey, thank you so much.
We'll have another show, you guys. We'll be going more in depth about that specific topic, survival. I didn't expect it to end like that, but when people are passionate about what they know, that sometimes happens. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Peace and blessings to everybody. Have a great day on purpose.